Hey everyone! So I'm going to be showing you how to make the easiest homemade bread ever. It has like 4 or 5 ingredients and it takes 20 minutes to rise, 20 minutes to bake, and it is delicious. It has no preservatives, has no dairy, it has no eggs. It's really, really delicious, and I just found it on Pinterest and I have perfected it a little bit, so I will be showing you how I make it because it makes it fluffier than the recipe originally showed. Okay, so I have my recipe written out just on a piece of printer paper because it does have a few variations in it. And then I have my great-grandmother's bread bowl. You can use a regular bowl, of course. But this one has, you can see it has a flat side. That's so that you can turn it on its side and knead the bread inside the bowl without the bowl rolling all over the counter. Then I have measuring cup that we're going to use for water. My favorite tiny little whisk that we're going to use for mixing the water and the honey. And that's really all you need for this first little bit. So we're going to start with 1.5 cups of warm water. You don't want it too hot or you'll kill the yeast. But you don't want it cold because you do need that heat to activate the yeast so that it grows. And then we're going to mix 1.5 cups of warm water with a tablespoon of honey. Now this is why the recipe isn't technically vegan, because it does have honey and yeast, which are both animal byproducts, but it does have no eggs and no dairy. So it's vegan-ish. Okay, so I have my 1.5 cups of water, and I'm just going to put my honey right into that. I'm going to get it all off my spoon by stirring it around so that it kind of melts off the spoon, and then I'm going to use the whisk. And I am going to whisk it up so that all of the honey and the water are all mixed together. You want it to be homogeneous. There's a fancy science word from like 6th grade. Because you don't want some of the yeast to grow and some of the yeast to not grow. You want it all even. And it's a little bit of trial and error with your, I'm home baking so I can lick my fingers. It's a little bit of trial and error with the temperature of your water. You'll get used to it eventually. So once your honey and your water are all mixed together, you'll see it'll turn kind of a golden kind of, but still see-through color. That's a good indication. You shouldn't see any lumps at the bottom for your honey. And then we're going to grab yeast. We need a tablespoon, but this is dirty so I'm going to rinse it out first. So the best place to keep your yeast is in the freezer. It holds the yeast organisms in like a suspended animation thing so that they don't just get old and die, and then your bread and biscuits and all those things go really flat. So the freezer helps to keep your yeast good for longer after you've bought it. So we're going to take our tablespoon again, and we are going to put a tablespoon of yeast in with our honey water. Okay, give it a quick stir, but not too much, and then just let it sit, okay? This is going to grow, and it should start to smell very yeasty, very like fresh bread. And the smell of fresh bread is just the smell of yeast. That's what we're smelling. So it should get very bubbly, and fingers crossed it does, so I can show you how that is. Let that be, and we're going to start with our flour. Alright, so we've got our flour and our salt that comes next. So in this bowl, you're going to measure 3.5 cups of flour. You might need another cup later on, and that's just kind of up to your discretion to see how your bread specifically is holding together. We're also going to put in 1.5 teaspoons of salt. Now I did this on video, except it wasn't recording, so I'm awful at this apparently. The recipe originally called for the salt to go in with the yeast and honey and water. Don't ever do that because the salt will kill your yeast. It turns it into salt water and that kills the yeast. So it'll make your yeast less bubbly, which will make your bread less fluffy. It's just not fun. So put your salt in and mix it together with your flour so that it's evenly distributed so that the salt doesn't affect the yeast. But you still need salt in your bread because it balances, kind of like we did salt in the cookies last time. Okay, so let's check back in with our yeast here. It is looking very fluffy. You can see we've got all this foam here and it's all one yeasty kind of color. That is perfect. We're actually going to let it sit for just a little bit longer. And while we do that, we're going to turn on our oven. All right, we're turning our oven on to 400. And we want to do this early enough so that the top of the oven will get a little bit warm for our bread to rise. Okay, and then you'll see even in like the 2-3 minutes, our yeast is almost bubbled all the way now to the top of the glass. This is perfect. We're now going to dump this into our flour mixture, and we are going to knead it together, and I will show you why we might need extra flour. Alright everyone, my phone screen timed out and deleted all the video that I just did. I'm really not doing great at this today. So I mixed the yeast and water mixture in with the flour, and it's starting to look good, but you want to work with your hands now to make it all one lump, kind of like how I finished off the cookie dough. You want it to all stick to itself, and if it is too dry, you add a bit more water. If it is too sticky and is sticking to your hands too much, then you add a bit more flour until you just get a perfect little dough lump that is smooth and sticking together. So I'll show you at the end, probably, if my phone doesn't conk out. Okay, so this is the kneading technique that I use. Turn it, and then you squish with the heel of your hand, turn and squish. So you're basically, and then, yeah, you're basically just squishing it all together. And this is still a bit sticky, as you can see, so take your clean hand, pinch some flour, and you just work it in. Until it stops sticking too terribly, but you can see that it's now more of like one lump, and you can use it to kind of like clean your bowl as well. People keep messaging me. I'm not that popular, honestly. It's just my family members. I got a couple job offers, woo, and they're congratulating me on them. So. Alright, I'll show you the finished product in just a sec. Alright, so this one is done. It is all one lump, and see when I touch it, it doesn't come away sticky at all. But it's still soft. You don't want to over knead, and this is kind of something that's a little bit trial and error. You don't want to over knead because you don't want your bread to be tough. So we are going to take it and we are going to split it into 2 loaves, and we are going to shape both into loaf type shapes and put them on this pan here, and we're going to let them rise covered in a towel for 20 minutes. This is going to get all the bubbles from the yeast into the bread so that the bread is actually fluffy. Alright, so if you don't want your bread to stick to your dish towel, you can take a little bit of flour and just flour the top of your loaf. There we go. And we're not going to work this into the bread, so this won't affect the doughiness, oh dear, the density of your bread. Okay, and then you just cover with a towel, just like that, and then set a timer. You can use this timer, yeah, for 20 minutes, and it's going to rise for 20 minutes. During this time, you can do your cleanup, or make your soup, or whatever it is else that you need to do that day. And voila! The bread has grown quite a bit. Now you're going to need to put a couple slits in the top so that the bread cracks nicely and doesn't just like rip apart, or yeah. Anyway, it also looks a lot prettier. So, pro tip, again, use scissors instead of a knife. A knife you'll just kind of drag across the top. Scissors make it real easy to just go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And actually I'll make that one a little bit bigger. There you go. So now that you've got your lovely artistic artistic snips in the top of your bread, you are going to just pop it in the oven. The oven is at 400. You're going to pop those into the oven for another 20 minutes, and then you'll be done, and you have made bread, and it is delicious. Do be careful taking it off the pan, because I have, let's see if I still have it, a fairly good scar. It doesn't always show up. That little dark mark, no, you can't see it here, from baking this specific bread, and I went to take it off the pan, and I dropped the other loaf and tried to catch it, and the pan landed on my arm, so just be careful with that. But yeah, 20 minutes from now, you will have 2 delicious loaves of fluffy bread. You're going to want to get a couple cooling racks so that they can cool. I'm actually going to put mine into a container because I'm taking them to my grandmother's house for dinner tonight, And I will, when we slice them, I'll let you see what the insides look like, because it is better than any store-bought bread you will ever buy. Thank you for watching, and I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know if you try out this recipe.